Hello, welcome to the Light from Above. My name is David Kenney. I'm the preacher for the Church of Christ in Wadsworth, Ohio. Glad you can watch our program. Today I want to talk about, to go back way back in history, but we're going to talk about Has America Forgotten? I want to talk about the year 1407. The Israelites had left Egypt about 40 years prior. Now this is 1407 BC. And an old man gets up to talk to him. He's about 120 years old. And he's getting ready to address the assembly. They knew him very well. Even though he was like 120 years old, the text still says in Deuteronomy 34, verse 7, his eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. He didn't have a PA system. He didn't have high definition stuff. He didn't have any of that. But he led these people out of Egypt, and now estimates are 2.5 to 3 million of them. He's near the end of his life. And he makes an address, and he makes some statements, and I want us to think about them as it relates to our country. In Deuteronomy 8, 7 through 14, it's long, but it's important. It says, "For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper. When you have eaten and are full, then you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command you today, lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage." The man is Moses, and Moses is warning the people. He's telling them, you're going into the promised land, and it's a great land. And, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a wonderful time. You are going to build these wonderful houses. You're going to have a great economy and all that. And you need to be careful that you don't forget that God's the one that's helping you with this. You don't want to forget the Lord, because if you do, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose that. Well, what happened to them? Did they remember or not? Well, sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. And as time goes by, they get really bad. And God sends them prophets and all that. But we know from history the Assyrians destroyed part of that nation in 722 BC. And then the Babylonians did so around 586 BCE. They took a remnant with them, but this nation was wiped out. If it wasn't for God preserving the remnant in Babylon, they would have probably been wiped off the face of the earth. But why? Was God all of a sudden powerless? No, they forgot about God. And we have been warned. Now, we might think, that's just Old Testament stuff. But let me show you a statement by William Penn. William Penn, in 1681, made this statement: "Men must be governed by God, or they will be ruled by tyrants." Now, there's people in our land today, they think they don't need God anymore. They think they have a bureaucracy there, a government to protect them. Or they think they have a nuclear arsenal to do that. And those kinds of things could be pitfalls, and we need to be mindful of that. We cannot forget about God. We cannot allow that to happen, or we're going to lose our nation. And some people think, well, what's God have to do with our nation? Well, let me just show you this picture. This says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And I circled there for you that Leviticus 25, verse 10. That's from the Bible. This is the Liberty Bell. This is... Our founding fathers knew the importance of acknowledging God. And they put it, I know there are certain segments of our country that are trying to wipe out any history that doesn't agree with them. And that's sad. You may want to argue about that or whatever, but one of the things that they're trying to do is they're trying to expunge God from anything they can do. And that's the same thing as not only forgetting about God, but it's rebelling against God. And it's sort of interesting. Dave Miller showed this to me, and I want to show you this seal of the United States, and you may not recognize that, and I grabbed some stuff from greatseal.com. You can check it out. But this was Benjamin Franklin's proposed seal for the United States of America. And notice that rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God around, the circle there. But look at the picture. Now, you may not recognize that right off the bat, but let me tell you what it is. That is referring to the exodus of the Egyptians losing control of the Israelites, and the Israelites becoming free because God's divine intervention. And they understood that if God was on their side and they respected him, that God would intervene and help them, not with Egypt, but with England, and to get their freedom. And they tied that theme together because they believed that. Now, sometimes people scoff at Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson. Oh, they didn't really believe in the God of the Bible. Well, what about this? We need to pay attention to that. I don't know how many of our schools are even going there with our children today. And there's going to be a consequence of that unless people wake up to it. Well, sometimes we get complacent. Let me show you some crime rates in the United States. This is from the crime report from 2015. And I gave you the number there to look at and everything. And, the numbers there show you that, some things are looking pretty good. They're declining. At least, 2015. It's a little dated, but not too bad. But you see that and you say, hey, we're doing pretty good. We're doing a lot better without God. Well, take a look at this next one. This one is the number of incidents. Well, still, you look at that and you go, wow, we're doing pretty good. So far, and I've heard people say this to me, we have pushed prayer out of the schools and we've gotten rid of abstinence education and we've got, we're getting rid of God and we're going to a secular government under the guise of separation of church and state. They talk all about that, really high and mighty about it. And then they cite these statistics, and that's good. But you know what? The statistics are only good as long as you're looking at the trend. I mean, we still have crime. But the interesting thing about these kind of statistics to me, what about when you're the person? When you're the person. And I came across this, it's called a crime clock. And it was published, and I just thought I'd share it with you, and I'd read some of this to you. And it's pretty up to date. It says, homicide, one person is murdered every 31 minutes. It's hard to believe in the town I live in, or where I worship at, but the town I live in, I live close to Cleveland. And so you look at those numbers, you go, well, I could see that. A person is raped every 1.9 minutes. Aggravated assault, one person is assaulted every 36.9 seconds. Or larceny, theft, one home is victimized by theft every 4.8 seconds. I personally experienced that myself. Burglary, one home is burglarized every 18 seconds. Had that happen to me too. Domestic violence, one woman is victimized by an intimate partner every 52 seconds. One man is victimized every 3.5 minutes. It's not just women that are victims of that, and that is a real tragedy that anybody is a victim of that. Child abuse and neglect. One child is reported abused or neglected every 34.9 seconds. How about drunk driving? One person is killed in an alcohol-related traffic crash every 40.4 minutes. Identity fraud. Something sort of new, right? One person's the victim of identity theft every 4.9 seconds. Or abuse of the elderly. One elderly person is victimized by a violent crime every 4.2 minutes. Or a hate crime is reported to the police every 69 minutes. Now, when we think about that and ask the question, has America forgotten God? I want you to think about these statements. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody here, but I want to read to you some statements here, and I want you to think about them. Quote, these and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterances that this is a Christian nation. Now that was David Josiah Brewer. He was a justice on the Supreme Court, 1892. Now listen to this person, and those of you who follow national politics, you'll recognize this, I'm sure. But this is from June 28th, 2006. This isn't exactly what the person said, but this is their prepared remarks. So I'm quoting what they meant to say. Given the increasing diversity of America's population, the dangers of sectarianism have never been greater. Whatever we once were, we are no longer just a Christian nation. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, a Buddhist nation, a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers. Well, what about that? Well, people say, well, yeah, we know that. We see them building their synagogues, building their places of worship, their temples and things like that. We see that. But what's the attitude towards Christianity? What's people's attitude towards that? Is that going to have any impact? What about acknowledging the God of the Bible as opposed to, a higher power or these other, names or ideas, concepts they have? What about that? Is that going to be a consequence? My personal favorite president said this: if we ever forget that we are one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under. Some people look at that and they go, oh, that's trite. That's just, that's not really all that important. But is it? Is it? We tend to take things for granted, don't we? Have we not become more and more wealthy? I know you could talk about, the unemployment, and you could talk about all those things, but I'm just thinking, if you look around, and especially if you look at world statistics, we are a very wealthy nation. We're very wealthy. Well, with that wealth comes the temptation to imagine that we're self-sufficient. That goes on long enough, we think that we're all sufficient. We keep doing that, what we do? We think we're God. And then we reject God. Now, you would think that, that might be controversial in this day and age, but there was a time the stuff that I just said, the things I just pointed out, people would nod. Not this way, but they go, oh, yeah, we know that. We understand that. Everybody knows that. But what about today? Things have changed. Well, have they forgotten about God? And I want to talk about three things that we need to make sure that we remember about God. One is God will punish the sinful and the proud. He will do that. In Deuteronomy 8:20, Moses said, as the nations which the Lord destroys before you, so you shall perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of the Lord your God. There was wickedness in that land, and Moses is warning them, if you become like them, God is going to punish you. Why? Because he punishes evil. Proverbs 14:34, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Well, what's he mean by that? Sin is a reproach to any people. Well, just watch a parade. I mean, we have some of these things on parade now. Those things are evil. Probably get in trouble for saying that. But we need to remember, has America forgotten that God will punish evil? Or Psalm 9, verse 17, the wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. Do people even believe in hell anymore? Do they even believe in God anymore? There was a historian a long time ago by the name of Edward Gibbon. He wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Real popular book. I've known about it for years. And he gave 5 reasons why the Roman Empire fell. And here are the 5. Rapid increase in divorce and undermining the sanctity of the home. Do we have any of that going on? Higher and higher taxes and spending of public funds on entertainment or the dole system. I'm sure we don't have any of that. A mad craze for pleasure with sports increasing in brutality. No comment. Building gigantic armaments while ignoring internal decay. Remember I talked about that nuclear arsenal? A declining of religious interest, with faith becoming a mere form, out of touch with the needs of the people. What did people do about that? He gave some very stark warning. An interesting thing about him, he wasn't a Christian. And so he was able to see that the Roman Empire crumbled. it crumbled. Remember, Abraham Lincoln warned us, right? We won't be conquered from without. If we're conquered, it'll be because we conquered ourselves. We crumbled from within. What do you think he's talking about there? You think he might have read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire? I'm sure he was at least familiar with it. What about our nation? Have we forgotten that God punishes evil? But some people, they're so snide. They'll say, they'll go, well, I don't see a lightning bolt up there. Well, God is very patient. Some people have forgotten to remember that when God destroyed the Israelites, he did it by the hand of international powers, the Assyrians and the Babylonians. When he wanted to punish them, that's what he did. Now, people will scoff at that, but that's the historical record. Another thing, has America forgotten that God is the source of every blessing? It's not, some people have a distorted view of God, but God wanted the best for them. Moses warned them not to say this kind of a thing. Then you shall say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. Well, what have we done? Evolution is taught as fact rather than theory. Bibles are being banned from schools and people's desks. Prayers, if they're being offered, are offered in such a generic fashion that you have no idea who they're talking about. A rising generation of atheists, the nuns, and those embracing socialism and secular humanism. It's just baffling to me that people think that socialism is a good thing in this nation. It's baffling to me because not that long ago, everybody was like, those things are not good. Keep them out of our country. But we need to continue to remember to teach these things so people know. The passage in Luke 12, 18 through 19 is one of Jesus' parables. It's really short. So he said, he's talking about the rich farmer, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God responded to that. And he said, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. What about our country? I mean, can you even see? I mean, it seems like people, if they're just slightly observant of that, they could see the points that are tied there. Have we forgotten James 1:17 that every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning? If we forget that as a nation, God will forget us. That's not something that's going to be good for our nation. It's something that every parent ought to do what they can to teach their children. And it might be the situation that grandparents need to teach their grandchildren those things if this nation's going to endure. I'm sure there were times, I know there were, because I read the Old Testament, there were times they made fun of people like Elijah and Elisha. They mocked them. They mocked Jeremiah, and they really mistreated Jeremiah. There's no way this stuff that you're talking about is going to happen, but it did. I'm sure there are people that will watch this show. They'll mock it. Oh, everything's been going fine. We don't have a problem. I'm sure there were people back then that did that too. How'd that happen? Because they forgot that God is the source of every good thing they had, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not. That goes on long enough. There's a tipping point to that. I don't know what the tipping point is, but I know there is such a thing. Where are we at with it? I wouldn't even hazard a guess. But I tell you what, the consequences are so serious that every parent, every grandparent, every citizen ought to take these things really seriously, because once the consequences of forgetting these things start rolling, trying to push those back is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. Another one that I want to talk about is, has America forgotten that man does not live by bread alone? This is one of the things that Moses said to Israel in Deuteronomy 8:3. So he humbled you, God humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. You ever sort of wonder what the term manna was? You're going to have to do some serious Bible study, because there are people out there that are in the field of theology, nothing against that term. They're religious people, but they'll say something like this: oh, you know what? That manna, what that was these bushes out in the Sinai Peninsula, or these insects, and they secreted this substance, and so they lived off of that. Now, remember I told you, it's like 2.5 million people. Now, how's that going to work? But the interesting thing to me is, just ask yourself this question. If they're looking at a bush and saying, oh, there's a product off that bush, a gummy substance, why would they call that manna? Well, that's what they call that. No, it's not. Manna, the word, Hebrew, means literally, what is this? That's what it means. What is this? They had no idea what that was. They had no idea. God gave them the instructions of what it was. He told them when to pick it up, how much to pick up. He gave them regulations about it. There is no way they would have survived in the wilderness without God. Manna, what is it? It came from God. They could not live by their own bread alone. They needed God. In Luke 12:15, and he, Jesus, said to them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Materialism or consumerism, greed. Do we have any of that in our land? Can anyone doubt that we are a consumer, materialistic society? If we let that go on too long or too far, we'll fail to realize that man doesn't live by bread alone, but by the hand of God. Our society needs to be reminded of what Jesus taught in Mark 8:36. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? People they're empire building. They build corporations. They build walls. They do all that stuff, and they want to acquire wealth. They want to acquire power, and they want to do those things, and they build nations, armies. But if they forget God, what value is that? That only has a temporary value if they forget God. We need to remember things like this. Psalm 47, 7-9. For God is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with understanding. God reigns over the nations. God sits on his holy throne. The princes of the people have gathered together. The people of God, of Abraham. For the shields of the earth belong to God. He is greatly exalted. If God would uproot the people that he said were his people, if he would uproot their nation because of their unbelief and their rebellion against him, do you think that he wouldn't do it to this nation? Has man forgotten God? Thank you for watching our program today. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly, so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And that the key word is faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.